Hello, once again, Kenny Jacobs from Bloomington, Illinois. Going to do another video today talking about current events as it relates to Bible prophecy. And this has potential to be a very long video, so I'm going to get right into it. This week, the UN General Assembly is underway. Barack Hussein Obama spoke there today, and then he chaired a meeting. I want to cover a little bit of what he said during his speech, and then I want to get into several news stories. Again, today is just another indication of how close we are to the end of this age. All the signs are here. It is unbelievable how fast things are going. And the stuff that Obama talked about in his speech and the news stories I'm going to cover today, again, should just be another huge wake-up call to anyone who doubts we're living in the last days or is not ready for the return of Jesus Christ. So with that, let's get into it. And watching his speech, I was absolutely amazed, and it kind of reminded me of a scene from the Left Behind movie when Nikolai Carpathia, who was the name of the Antichrist in the Left Behind movies, was having a meeting, basically at the United Nations, and during the meeting he shot and killed somebody. And then at the end of the meeting, no one thought that that's what happened. Nobody remembered that Carpathia shot somebody. They thought the guy shot himself. They completely just were taken in and I guess, I don't know how to say it, just fooled by the power of the Antichrist. And he was able to trick them into believing a lie. Well, watching Obama speak at the UN today, it's exactly what it seemed like. Now, obviously, he didn't shoot and kill anybody, but he didn't come close to saying anything that was true either. In fact, I just saw John Bolton on Fox News talking about that, and he said his speech rarely, if ever, touched on truth. Well, let's get into it and talk about a little bit about that. Well, I'm just going to go through certain comments that he made. For one, he said that the prospect of world war is reduced since the formation of the United Nations. What? We are at war right now. He won't say that we are, but we are. Look at the war going on in Syria. Israel and Hamas just ended a 50-day battle that I'm sure is going to resume at some point soon, probably. We got ISIS going all over through the Middle East. There's war in the Ukraine. Pope Francis himself said last week that World War III has already started, yet Obama stands at the United Nations and talks about how the world's a safer place and that there's less prospect of world war. When it sure looks to me that we are in the beginning stages of World War III. That's probably the only thing Pope Francis has ever said that I agree with. But how can Barack Obama stand there in a speech at the United Nations and make a comment like that? And again, no one really ever questions some of these statements he makes. It's amazing to me. But then he says that they've cut poverty in half, and that he has a plan to end extreme poverty by 2030. Well, if we look at what he's done with the economy now, in the 6 years he's been president, he hasn't got a good track record. I certainly don't think what he's doing now is going to continue to make things better, and I have no idea what he's talking about cutting poverty in half when there's more people on food stamps than ever before. He says the rural economy is good and continues to strengthen. What is he talking about? The rural economy is on the verge of collapse. And the New World Order elite want the economy to collapse because there's going to be a new world order with a one world government and a one world monetary system known as the Mark of the Beast. And the world economy will collapse first. which will really probably be started by the collapse of the U.S. economy and the collapse of the dollar. And he has the audacity to say the world economy is continuing to strengthen. Wow. Here's a funny one. People now resolve differences peacefully. Where did he get that at? A Frenchman was beheaded today by terrorists. We've had people beheaded. We've got terrorism running rampant all around the world. We've got almost martial law in Ferguson, Missouri a week or two ago because of violence on the streets, protests, the police state that we're living under, violence everywhere. There's wars and rumors of wars. How can you make a statement that people now resolve differences peacefully? I'm absolutely flabbergasted that he can say something like that. Best time in human history to be born. I would say that this is the most exciting time in human history to live because Jesus Christ is going to return soon. And it's going to be unreal to see that happen. And all the signs that Jesus said are here, would be here, are here. So without a doubt, we're living in the last days. But the best time in human history to be born, with Ebola spreading around the world, wars and rumors of wars, extreme terrorism, poverty, the world economy on the verge of collapse, the climate, they're calling it global warming or climate change. I call it sea and waves roaring and birth pangs is what Jesus called it in the Gospels. The birth pangs, the beginning of sorrows, the natural catastrophes and earthquakes that the Bible predicted would be here. Certainly that is happening. About the economy and being a great time to be alive, and how much there's great opportunity. College graduates can't find jobs and they're moving home and living with their parents. They're college graduates with nice degrees are working for part-time jobs and they're working for minimum wage. It's not real. What opportunity is there out there right now? Best time in human history. Really, the Bible says, let's look at Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7, because we are about to head into the final 7-year period of time, known as the time of Jacob's trouble. That's what Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7 says, Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, that he shall be saved out of it. Let's look at Matthew chapter 24 real quick. Matthew 24. Verses 21 and 22. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world, to this time, no nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Let's back up here. Matthew chapter 24. Verse 6, after the disciples asked Jesus what would be the signs of the end of the world, he said, You shall hear wars and rumors of wars. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All of these the beginning of sorrows. They shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. We see that happening now with Christian persecution all around the world. And Barack Hussein Obama doesn't seem to want to do anything about getting some of our American Christians who are being held in North Korea and Iran, doesn't seem to want to go out of his way to help them any. Let's move on. This is unreal. Let's move on. But then after talking about how great things are, then he turns around and he condemns Russia and talks about Russian aggression, and then has to talk about Syria and Iraq. And he won't use the word extreme terrorism or jihadist or Muslim or radical terrorism and radical Islamic terrorism. But he does like to talk about extremism and sectarianism. Mark my words, even though there are no radical Christians causing havoc around the world and killing people, when they're talking about sectarian violence and extremism, it's going to turn out that the ones that they're going to go after are Christians and Jews. They're going to go after the Israeli people, they're going to go after Christians, and the one world government, which the Christians and the Jewish people are going to fight, are the ones that are going to pay the price. And you can see it happening again already. They talk about tolerant, or they talk about intolerance, but they are the ones that are intolerant of the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it's kind of funny because he said America is not the same as it was 100 years ago. Exactly, 100 years ago, God hadn't been kicked out of our society. You can still pray in schools. You can still say the Pledge of Allegiance and say, you could quote Scripture. You could read a Bible in school. Can't do that anymore. You're right. It's definitely not the same America it was 100 years ago. And he said, we hold our leaders accountable. Really? If that were so, why, Eric Holder wouldn't be in office anymore. And you, Mr. Obama, would have been impeached by now. The guy just doesn't have a concept of reality or truth. Went on after talking about extremism and intolerance. He's talking about their collective responsibility for global problems. We're hearing this phrase global and collective responsibility a lot. Again, we're getting pulled into the one world government. And he talked about the dangers of religiously motivated extremists. Without a doubt, the Department of Homeland Security would consider me a religiously motivated extremist because I do videos every single night talking about corruption in our government, talking about the Antichrist, talking about the false prophet, talking about the return of Jesus Christ, and most importantly, talking about the fact that Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation, that there is no other name by which we must be saved, and that Jesus Christ himself said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. And then he made this comment, 2 states living side by side in peace and security. Exact quote. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Barack Hussein Obama said that exact thing. 2 states living side by side in peace and security. Let's look at some news stories that are related to all of this. And you're going to notice a theme in these news stories. This is out of the Jerusalem Post today. The headline, Time to Restart Israeli-Palestinian Talks Based on the Arab Initiative, Jordan's King Abdullah tells the UN. Now, I did a video a few nights ago saying that this Arab Initiative may very well turn out to be the covenant with many. And now at the UN today, King Abdullah is promoting the same thing. So let's look at it. UN Secretary General opens body's general debate, which will see some 196 speakers, including Obama, Netanyahu, and Abbas, and they address urgent international crises. King Abdullah II of Jordan asked world leaders on Israel on Wednesday to urge Israel and the Palestinian Authority to find lasting peace by relaunching talks based on the Arab Peace Initiative. Again, the Arab Peace Initiative is all 57 Muslim states say that they will recognize Israel as a nation, as a state. If they will agree to withdraw from what they call the occupied territories of Gaza and the West Bank, and agree to allow East Jerusalem to be the capital of the two-state solution, the Palestinian state. But again, 57 Muslim states in Israel would definitely be considered a covenant with many. Let's continue on. During his remarks before the UN General Assembly in New York The monarch said that the conflict is a strain on the region and on the resources of his country, in particular, which is the world's third largest host of refugees, including nearly 1.4 million Syrians. I'll be talking a little more about refugees later on. It says the refugee crisis is a recognized global responsibility and demands a global solution. Abdullah said, to date, the response has not kept pace with the real needs. And keep that in mind again. He's talking about the refugee crisis being a global responsibility. Keep that in mind. It's King Jordan King Hussein of Jordan. King Abdullah, sorry about that. King Abdullah of Jordan is the one saying that. Okay, he talked about the pressure of hosting so many refugees and urged world leaders to push for an answer to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to alleviate pressure in the region. He said, we cannot address the future of my region without addressing its central conflict. Here we go. The denial of Palestinian rights and statehood. The goal for the region is still a two-state solution, he said, echoing the Egyptian president's speech, who said the same thing. Abdullah called for respect of the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the capital. Without statehood, the conflict will continue and drain the region. Again, it's all Israel's fault. All the countries are saying the same thing. It's all Israel's fault. Leaders from the Arab world have differentiated time and time again between members of ISIS and Islam. And it says, Abdullah made that distinction in front of the General Assembly and called on world leaders not to misconstrue Muslims for extremists. Well, there's another story I'm going to talk about on that in just a minute, but let's continue on. The true teachings of Islam are clear. Sectarian conflict and strife are utterly condemned. Not in the Quran, they're not. Don't buy into the lie that the Muslims want peace. It's not in the Quran, and it's definitely not the case. Let's continue on. Together, we must undertake urgent humanitarian and security measures, create durable solutions for today's crises, and provide new opportunities for dialogue, reconciliation, prosperity, and peace. All right. So, let's look at another article. And this is also out of the Jerusalem Post today. Gonna love this one. Arab and Muslim states question Israel's right to defend itself. Unbelievable. Now, this is actually going on at the UN. Arab and Muslim states question Israel's right to defend itself. And we expect Israel to give up their land for a two-state solution, a land for peace deal, when the people that have been attacking them are wondering why Israel even has a right to defend itself. It says Israel is the only country at the United Nations which is debated by the Human Rights Council at every session. Two major groups of Arab states questioned Israel's rights to defend itself against Hamas in Gaza in addresses to the United Nations Human Rights Council on Monday in Geneva. Describing Israel's actions in Gaza as self-defense is both legally incorrect and morally abhorrent, said Pakistan, speaking on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. As the occupying power, Israel does not have the right to defend itself from Hamas, a group which is under its control, said the United Arab Emirates, speaking on behalf of the Arab group at the UN. Wow. And which is very interesting because the United Arab Emirates, a part of our new Arab coalition, is supposedly fighting with us against ISIS right now. I can't believe I'm reading this. Israel does not have the right to defend itself from Hamas. So Hamas can just keep firing rockets into Israel all at once because Israel shouldn't have the right to defend itself against Hamas. Wow. The countries were among some 30 nations that spoke against Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank. They included Russia and China, who are both members of the Security Council. China said it supports the Palestinian drive to become a member state of the United Nations. Other countries that took the floor from the Middle East are Asia, India, and Latin America. Venezuela accused Israel of war crimes and genocidal action during the Gaza war this summer. Ireland condemned both Israel and Hamas for unacceptable as unacceptable for attacking innocent civilians during the Gaza war. A number of countries, including Iran and Pakistan, took issue with the absence of Western countries, which are protesting the UNHRC's decision to debate Israel at each session under Standing Agenda Item 7. That's enough of that. Unreal. What an article. Just the headline itself. They're actually allowing this debate to take place. Should Israel have the right to defend itself against Hamas? Not to mention Hezbollah and ISIS and Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda and any other terrorist group that decides to come up against them. Wow. Okay, enough of that. Wow, let's continue on. Amazing. Jeez. Well, let's look at this article. This is out of the Arutz Sheva today. Let me get to it. Hopefully, my technology will work okay. Here we go. Police ambushed by Muslim rioters on the Temple Mount. Now, we keep hearing about how the Muslims are a religion of peace. These Muslims in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount are not affiliated with terrorist groups like Hamas or Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah or ISIS. They're just Muslims, and they riot every time a Jew wants to go onto the Temple Mount, which, by the way, is the holiest site to Judaism, the so-called third holiest site to the Muslims. But if you read the Quran, Jerusalem is not mentioned one single time. But here we go. Let's read more about the Muslim religion of peace right here. Police ambushed by Muslim rioters on the Temple Mount. Fireworks and rocks wound police as Jews enter holy site in Judaism mere hours before Rosh Hashanah. One Jew arrested. Okay, dozens of Arab rioters began shooting fireworks at police on the Temple Mount on Wednesday morning, just hours before the Jewish New Year began, and as soon as the holiest site in Jerusalem was open to Jewish visitors. The rioters fired at police at the Maghrabi Gate, which is the only point of access for Jewish visitors to the site currently under the de facto rule of the Jordanian Waqf. Yassam Police Special Forces and Border Patrol officers pushed their way onto the Temple Mount and pressed back the rioters. Upon arriving on the holy site, police forces came face to face with dozens of rioters who had prepared obstacles on the mount, from which they threw rocks and bricks at the officers while continuing to launch fireworks at them. Wow. Some of the officers were wounded and were provided medical treatment at the scene. It says, Yehuda Glick, head of the Liba Movement for Freedom of Movement on the Temple Mount, praised the police for their firm action, saying that as a result, as of now, around 100 Jews have entered. It turns out that when the police want to say they can deal with rioters, it doesn't start a world war. Wow, a Jew got arrested for prostrating himself in prayer at the holiest site in Judaism. Hear that again? The Arabs, the Muslims, are firing fireworks, throwing rocks, ambushing the police, and a Jew was arrested for prostrating himself in prayer at the holiest site in Judaism, an act that the Muslim Waqf guards have pressed Israeli police into forbidding, despite the fact that Israeli law guarantees the right of religious worship. The violent clash comes as part of what is being termed a silent intifada, in which Arab terror attacks in Jerusalem have grown exponentially in recent months. It is time Israel takes control of the Temple Mount. It's ridiculous. Every time it's opened up for one of their feasts, one of their holidays, and they try to go up there to visit, and they're not even allowed to pray. Like you can see here, the guy Drew got arrested for praying on the Temple Mount. There's rioting from the so-called religion of peace, who keep demanding a two-state solution, and are now questioning Israel's right to defend herself. And what's scary is the entire... It's not scary, again, it's a fact. It's just given. The Bible says, oh, this is going to happen. It's going to happen. The whole world is going to turn against Jerusalem, against Israel. We see it happening. But let's look at it scripturally real quick. Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3, and in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. And again, it uses that phrase, burdensome stone. That's where the Dome of the Rock is, which is a stone, and every time the Jews go up there, the peace-loving Muslims keep throwing stones at the Jews and at the police. I don't think that's a coincidence. So, wow. Let's continue on. I'll show you that America is also turning against Israel. Here's the headline. This is a statement from Barack Hussein Obama's speech at the UN today. The headline: Obama, too many Israelis ready to abandon peace. Why? Why should they be afraid of trying to make peace with people that don't believe they should have a right to exist and are now questioning, and before the UN, their rights to even defend themselves? The U.S. President says the status quo in the Arab-Israeli conflict is not sustainable as he addresses the UN General Assembly. Too many Israelis are ready to abandon peace, the U.S. President Barack Obama said on Wednesday as he addressed the United Nations General Assembly. Well, let's just see for a minute. How did the whole Gaza thing start this summer? 3 Jewish teenagers were murdered by Hamas. Israel retaliated. Gaza, Hamas fires hundreds upon hundreds of rockets into Israel the rest of the summer, from schools, from neighborhoods, from hospitals, trying to use human shields, trying to get as many civilians in Gaza killed as they can, make Israel look bad. Israel goes out of their way to warn citizens, drop pamphlets, make phone calls, send text messages telling people to clear out because they're going to attack. They even aborted some of the attacks when they could tell that they were going to hurt people, the civilians. And then Barack Hussein Obama says that the Israeli people are too ready to abandon peace. I just mind-boggled. Let's look at, real quickly, Psalm 83. I believe it's verse 5. Psalm 83. Is it 4 or 5? Psalm 83. Excuse me, verse 4. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. That's what the Palestinian, that's what the Hamas, that's what the Muslim goal is. Wipe Israel off the map, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. Yet Israel is being blamed for not striving for peace. Let's continue on. The situation in Iraq, Syria, and Libya should cure anyone of the illusion that this conflict is the main source of problems in the region. This is Barack Obama's talking. For far too long, it has been used in part as a way to distract people from problems at home. And the violence engulfing the region today has made too many Israelis ready to abandon the hard work of peace. But let's be clear, the status quo in the West Bank and Gaza is not sustainable. We cannot afford to turn away from this effort, not when rockets are fired at innocent Israelis or the lives of so many Palestinian children are taken from us in Gaza, he continued. Yes, but he's talking about the status quo in West Bank and Gaza, the so-called occupied territories. And the West Bank and Gaza should belong to the Jewish people. It's Judea and Samaria. It's part of the land of Israel that was given to God, to the Jewish people by God. It's their land. There's 57 Muslim states. I just talked about that, the Arab Initiative. 57 Muslim states, one Jewish state. The size of New Jersey, surrounded by enemies. And now we're questioning their right to defend themselves and trying to take their land away. Wow. And Obama is blaming Israel. So long as I am president, I will stand up for the principle that Israelis, Palestinians, the region, and the world will be more just with what? As long as I am president, we will stand up for the principle that Israelis, Palestinians, the region, and the world will be more just with two states living side by side in peace and security, said Obama. Guys, the United States of America is about to absolutely experience the judgment of God. We have been blessed as a nation because we have blessed Israel. We've stood behind them. We've been allies to them. And now, just like Zechariah 12:3 says, we are abandoning them in their time of need. Let's continue on. I have one more article. And remember, I was just referring you to the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, and some comments he made. Let's go to one of my favorite subjects when it comes to end-time Bible prophecy. Let's look at Pope Francis. Got to find the article. Pope Francis calls for biblical welcoming of immigrants. I just talked about how King Abdullah of Jordan was talking about immigration and migrants and how it's a global responsibility to take care of these people. Amazing. Same gospel that Pope Francis is calling for. Here we go. Pope Francis calls for biblical welcoming of immigrants. While we've got all our borders open, opening us up to terrorist attack through our borders and disease coming through our borders from illegal immigration, who, by the way, thousands, I saw the other day, thousands of illegal immigrants are being covered by Obamacare. Let's continue on. In his, hey, I'm not against immigration. That's how all of our ancestors came to America. But we should only be going with legal immigration. Alright, in his annual message for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, which in 2005 will be observed on January 18th, Pope Francis called on all to honor the biblical commandment of welcoming with respect and solidarity the stranger in need. Today, the Vatican released the Pope's message, Church Without Frontiers, Mother to All. Here he goes again with this Mother Church thing, in which the Francis reminded his readers that Jesus identified himself with strangers and outcasts. Jesus Christ is always willing to be recognized in migrants and refugees, in displaced persons and in exiles, and through them he calls us to share our resources and occasionally give up something of our acquired riches, he wrote. Large numbers of people are leaving their homelands with a suitcase full of fears and desires to undertake a hopeful and dangerous trip in search of more humane living conditions, says Francis. Such migration gives rise to suspicion and hostility, even in ecclesial communities, prior to any knowledge of the migrants' lives or their stories of persecution and destitution. But here's the important statement. Yet individual efforts are not enough, signaled the Pope. The scale of today's immigration demands international coordination, which is exactly what King Abdullah from Jordan said. Migration movements are on such a scale that only a systematic and active cooperation between states and international organizations can be capable of regulating and managing